Hey everybody, this is Michael once again. Alright, as you saw from the thumbnail, today's subject is about philosophy is broken for the poor, or can the poor afford philosophy? I'm not sure which title I'm going to go with yet. But essentially it's being a wannabe philosopher. And I work towards being stoic and all this stuff. Kind of had an epiphany or realization that poor people have a really hard time being stoic. And after having a kind of conversation and running this around a little bit, and can the poor actually afford to be stoic? And it's because, first of all, because the idea of stoicism, let's cover that, is you control what you cannot, and you control what you can and you accept what you cannot. That's the idea, and it's the virtue at its highest, good. It's being the best that you can be, essentially, and it is good for the mind and the soul, and of course the body, because if you treat the mind and the soul well, the body will follow, generally. But I guess a question is how can you accept your fate when your fate is eviction? You see what I mean? Because what I'm trying to say is if we, as the working class, as the people who are in the bottom rung of society or closer to that, if we practice emotional detachment for a system that is holding us down, would that not just be pacifying us and not liberating us in a way, which is the whole point of Stoicism, is for us to liberate ourselves from these needs and desires so that we can reach a higher mind or higher being? And it's hard because in order to be stoic, you need to have time to read, to reflect, to think deeply and critically. And if you have just the full-time 40-hour week, that's almost impossible. And that's not even counting if you have any family obligations. I'm just from me being a married man with no kids and no real family, besides my wife and her family, I have a really hard time just finishing some books sometimes, just because it's, especially if it, like a deep thinking book, because I'm rereading the Tao Te Ching again, and I like to stop and kind of absorb and think about it. And if you're working 40 hours or more, good luck with that. I really don't think you'd be able to do that. And because we need to struggle, we need to feel anger for improvement. Because imagine if slavery, if we told the slaves, like, hey, you just need to accept it, and don't get angry at something you can't control. I mean, could we really say that? And Epictetus, I've quoted him many times. He was a slave, and then he worked through Greek, I'm not entirely sure how, Greek culture, he was able to become not a slave and then became quite a prominent figure. But we don't quote Epictetus the slave, we quote Epictetus the philosopher. In fact, I can't really think of any quotes of a slave. I know of quotes from former slaves, but I think that kind of helps shows that, in order for you to be a philosopher, to even be a literary agent, like a writer back in the day, you already had to have been established and be able to not work for some time. So, and that's, I guess, to round back to the emotional detachment is that we have to be constantly weary and constantly questioning the systems that we have in place, and we have to be able to always be willing to change it, whether it's comfortable or not, because real growth happens when you're uncomfortable. And another danger with Stoicism I found myself falling in a trap was it was blame and internalization, essentially. And in a structured environment that we have here, it is very easy for the environment to turn what is structurally, the failings of the society can easily be put onto as a personal failing through Stoicism. And what I mean by that is, if I can't remain calm because I have a bunch of dumb coworkers, which I do, I have multiple jobs, and I dislike the majority of my coworkers. They are very just generally over rude, very overly. They're just rude, and they're very arrogant, and most of them are pretty young, which is sad because also the older crowd that I work with, because I work with a retail with a bunch of young kids, and then I work in like corporate. I don't want to say too much more. They're like property management, stuff like that, and I work with a bunch of older people, and the entitlement is just magnanimous on both sides, and I can't. But so if I'm part of the structure, and things are just not, because I'm constantly hearing things, the young crowd constantly talks bad about each other, and they gossip, and so if I get upset because my environment is toxic, is that me being stoic or not being stoic? Because I should just accept that this is a toxic environment, that I should just accept that people are going to talk badly about me, and like, yes, there is that to a degree, but if I did not have that anger, I wouldn't want to look for a new place. I would just be like, oh well, it is what it is, which is appropriate at times, but I'm not happy at this job, and there's no reason why I shouldn't stay at this job. I'm applying other places and doing all that, but that's one thing that Stoicism can do, or that's a trap that you can fall in with Stoicism that I myself found in, and so it's hard to kind of parse that out, because you have like this macro Stoicism of you should always be calm and serene, and no, you shouldn't. I mean, there are times where you should get upset, and you should, hey dude, I'm going to kick your face in for doing this, whatever, because everyone can agree kicking Hitler in the face is a good thing. So why weren't we stoic towards them, Nazi Germany, all that? You see what I mean? I know that's a bit of extreme, quite a bit jump, but also I can't think of a stronger example, because we have to be angry for some progress sometimes. But Stoicism isn't, like, as you know with this channel, you probably are a little surprised that I'm even kind of almost condemning Stoicism in a way. I don't want to say it like that, but kind of critiquing it, because on my days off, that's when I'm reading, that's when I'm reflecting. When I'm working, I don't even have time to, I barely have time to even eat sometimes. But we can break down Stoicism into more malleable, more chewable parts, especially if you're going through a really hard time. Like, I'm constantly worried about rent, and so you don't have to accept the situation, you don't have to accept that, but one thing you can do is do like kind of a micro control of, you could say, today I can be a kind person. And that is a form of Stoicism, that you are in control of your emotions, and you have intent and desire of what you're going to do with that. And that's once you have intent, and once you have like a goal, it's much easier to achieve that goal and to endure everything else. I mentioned my work, and I multiple jobs, and I dislike all of them. I don't want to work with any of these companies anymore, and especially any of these people. And because I have this little personal project I've been working on for years now, and it's really kind of coming to fruition now. And so that's what makes this abuse, this disrespect, durable at work. It's because I have this vision. I'm like, man, I hate being here, but I know if I'm being here, I'm being paid, and if I'm being paid, I can buy rent, groceries, and then maybe get this personal project off the ground. And this personal project, I'll be my own boss, and I will be my boss, and I will have people under me, and I will not be a jerk to them. Because, man, I've worked for too many jerks, and I don't want to be another one. But back to microcontrol. So you can find, how to conduct yourself in certain scenarios. And so you may not be like, oh, well, I'm going to accept the fact that I can't pay rent. Well, no, don't do that. You need to pay rent, and you need to work, hustle, get angry, get motivated, do whatever you need to do to make sure your rent is paid. And it's just, I wanted to kind of share that because a quote I have here is from Jiddu Krishnamurti. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I mean, so in a way, if it's how many of us would be accepting of slavery if it came back? Like that's a real question you should ask yourself. Like, what are you willing to do to rail against the system to make sure that your fellow individual doesn't have to be in bondage, in forced labor or anything like that, And also another quote I have here is, "Poverty is not a lack of character. Poverty is a lack of cash." And that's from Rutger Bregman. And, so it just, being stoic, being philosophical is very hard to do if you're constantly working and you're constantly doing that, as are many things. And I'm not saying that you should say or quit your job or anything, go live like a hermit, but like there's got to be a point where you have to acknowledge what you can encounter, because Stoicism says to accept what they can't control. Well, you can't control hunger. If you're a parent and your child's hungry, like, are you going to accept that you can't control that? No. By every means, everyone here, hopefully, is saying you should go do something to make sure that child's fed. And even if you can't do it, you shouldn't just lay down and die. This can't, because it just, yeah. That's just some of my thoughts I wanted to share, because I try and strive to be the best person I can be, but unfortunately I'm kept in this very small studio apartment, in this very low-level job, in this high company, because I am not seen as valuable towards my peers, and that's why. And I don't want to accept that, because I don't want to be stuck here. And if I accepted that, I will be stuck here. And so in a way, I have to kind of lean against Stoicism in this, because this would be pacification and not liberation for me. I'd accept the fact that I'm always looked down upon in my companies. I would accept the fact that, that I live in this studio apartment, and my wife and I would like to start a family, but we don't have the money to, because I'm not paid what I won't say it like that. I'm not paid a livable wage by any of my jobs. And one of them, like, when people find out what one of my jobs is, they are really shocked of how little I'm paid by that company, actually. But so just kind of round back this. So it's hard to understand if the poor, if we can actually afford to be stoic, to be philosophical, because to practice stoicism, to practice philosophy, it requires time, it requires peace, like to be able to go away to meditate for a little bit. It requires being able to journal. I write, I have journals, I have to-do lists, and these only really get filled out or done when I don't have work, when I'm not part of my 60-hour grind or whatever, like my 1 or 2 days, if I'm able to squirrel those away, like, off that I get, because I don't get guaranteed days off, and so on those days I have to work to be philosophical and all that. And so when you're working 40 plus hours, it's not really accessible, and again, I don't have any kids, so imagine if you were working that time and you had more than one kid. Like, when are you going to be able to even like read a book that you enjoy? Like, it's and yeah, and again, the Stoicism, if you can fall into a trap of like, oh, if I'm stressed or if I'm angry, I'm not stoic. No, you may be absolutely justified in your anger, in your stress. Again, if you're not able to pay rent, you should be stressed. Your life will change, possibly for the worse. I've been there. I hate that. How can you accept your fate when your fate is eviction? I don't know. It's just so let's focus on the smaller micro controls of saying, like, stoic, I can still be kind today. Despite this happening, I can still be a good person. I will still be nice. I'll still be kind. And and just, I don't know, this subject's been really kind of bugging me, is because the poor don't really have the chance to really do anything to improve our lives, like, because we're working so much. I'm working 2 jobs just to make rent, and I'm trying to get my California real estate license just so I can possibly move up in this company, and just because that's a requirement just for me to move up. Well, I mean, that's a couple $100 right there, a couple hours of time for me to study, and I have a hard enough time just for any of that, and so it really does seem like our society has, in a way, become so like poor against the poor, I guess, that we don't even have a chance. And I mean, in the company I work with, I'm just going to say this: it's a property company, and everybody in there above me is a nepo baby. They were hired because they were like friends of someone, or one of the owners, their dad was the owner of the company, and so like I don't really believe in working hard in this country anymore. It's all about who you know, and because the evidence of what I've seen is just, yeah. This is just my own personal experience. I could be wrong in many ways. I hope I am. But anyway, so this video ran on a little bit longer, so I apologize about that, everybody. But I hope you kind of, I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you think the poor can afford philosophy? Do you think that, in a way, Stoicism gaslights something? Oh, well, if you're upset, well, you're not stoic, and do you believe that, telling someone just to stay calm, could that be insulting in some ways? Like, if they are truly, legitimately, rightfully, or have the right to be upset, and you tell them to stay calm, are you the jerk? Are you trying to pacify them, or are you trying to liberate them? And just. But tell me, what do you guys think? Can the poor afford philosophy? I mean, are there any philosophies that you go by, or do you believe that there's a philosophy that the poor should be living by, of just, accept what you have, like the Confucius caste system, almost. But again, always, you can subscribe, like, comment the video. I may just want to hear your comments. Like, as far as the subscribing and all this stuff, I really don't believe that this channel is going to go far on YouTube, because it requires people to think, and YouTube doesn't want you to think. Anyway, take it easy, everybody.